Welcome to Risk Takers Unleashed. My guest today is Pia Ault, founder of Caballus Consulting and thought leader in leadership development and executive coaching. Thanks for joining the podcast. Buckle up. Let's go. My guest today is Pia Ault. Pia has 20 years of multinational senior leadership experience in enterprise-level organizations. Among other roles, Pia is an alumna of Cisco Systems, Lee Hecht Harrison, and Accenture. Her experience and background give her a very unique skill set for developing relationships and transforming leaders. With strength and focus in leadership development, executive coaching, talent and organizational management, strategy and business consulting, training and front room facilitation and delivery, Pia has over 10 years of research, study, and learning in psychology, empathy, and human behavior, backed by 2 master's degrees, all culminating in the work she does every day to impact people in her role at Caballus Coaching and Consulting. Pia has lived and traveled quite literally all over the world and currently lives in Andalusia, Spain with her husband, Eric. I worked with Pia during our mutual tenure at Cisco Systems. I consider her a cherished colleague and personal friend. Pia, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you, Mike. Glad to be here.
Talk a little bit about your background. How'd you get here? Here we are in 2023. How'd you arrive at this place? What was your journey?
Wow. I don't normally think about that. It's a question that we don't, we look back and we reminisce. But when I think back to, getting out of high school and then going to university, that seems like lifetimes ago, right?
Yeah.
So I grew up in Denmark. I was born in Copenhagen. And I guess it always felt like Denmark was too small for me.
Yeah.
And I don't mean that in a disrespectful or, negative way at all. It just, like, I always had a hunger for more. I was really curious. And I don't remember specifically why it was the U.S. I think that was by chance. I knew somebody that was already over there as a nanny or an au pair. And I started as a nanny in Chicago.
Right.
I did that for about 9 months. And then I got sick of taking care of 3 little kids. I was 19. I'm like, too young to be a mother kind of thing,
Yeah.
So I decided to go to university. And because I was in Chicago, Southern Illinois University seemed to be the choice of the time.
Yeah.
So I went back to Denmark to save up enough money for the first semester. And I told my mom, I'm only going to be gone for about a year. I just want to try it. And she didn't see me for the next 16 years. I came back with a husband and 2 kids and went, yeah, that was a long year. But yeah, honestly, it went from 1 year to 2 years. And then I thought, well, I can graduate in 3 years because my high school had availed me. At that point, the Danish system was far advanced. So it availed me with a lot of courses that kind of hit the requirements. So I graduated in 3 years. And during the university time is when I met my husband, junior year.
Yeah.
And we got married after we both graduated. And then it just started, with one international company. I think I started at Newark Electronics.
Wow.
In Chicago. I never ever thought that I would go into IT technology or electronics, but that's kind of what I landed, right out of school. And then it just grew from there. Yeah. I started getting more experience. I got more education and started climbing the corporate ladder. And Newark Electronics became Morton International.
Yeah.
Morton International, then to Amphenol, and then eventually Cisco. And, So, wow, just was going to be an au pair for a year. That's it.
And I think that's, you don't know in those younger years. And, maybe in a way, my journey, I don't know that I ever once thought I'm going to go work in technology. It actually wasn't. When we're contemporaries, I think we can say, and it wasn't really even a thing. I can remember as a kid, I was really one of those geeks who I'd take computer parts and put them together and build computers and stuff. This is in the 80s. And that was bad enough. That was kind of like, people would give you that look like, he's one of those weird kids, And because, then it was kind of like, that's a fad. What can you do with that thing? You'd like hit print and it would take like 4 minutes for a document to even just compile to be loaded in and come off the print. I mean, it was just a different world. And you didn't have that sense of, I think, importance and gravitas with tech. That to me, I first saw the real power of it in business school in about like 95, 96. And I went to UCLA Anderson School and they installed a network, an Ethernet network in the school. And it was mind blowing. It was kind of, wait, I can send a file to somebody else. Wow. And, so it was mind blown. But I think that was the first time I saw any power of this because of this social communication context that now, we take all of this for granted. You're sitting in Andalusia, Spain. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee right now, talking to each other like you're sitting across from me. So
yeah,
I love the happy accidents in life, though, where you kind of go like, well, I guess I'm in technology now,
Yeah. I mean, yeah, right. Because I like many other, young girls, I'm sure I had other aspirations. I did at one point want to be an astronaut.
Yeah.
And I remember my mom, love her to death.
Yeah.
And it's just what our parents do, right? They mean well.
Yeah.
And I'm now coaching a lot of senior leaders who their dreams were crushed inadvertently by their parents because I'd love to be an astronaut, and here comes my mom, honey, you really got to be good at math, and you got to start and then it was like, okay, I guess I won't. Right. So like that went into the shadow, and then it's like, okay, let's try something else. Ballerina, honey, your toes are not long enough. You've got skinny legs, but and you can only do it till you're 25. So it's like, okay, what might I need to do in order to not fail or, be crushed? And so a lot of us, I think, come into our careers because we're preconditioned to what we can't or shouldn't do. Right.
Wow.
And then we go do whatever we do, we're rewarded for doing. Not for being.
That story, I think, is almost everywhere. I've got that too. It's and I've reconciled with, I think the parents meant well, in their advice. They just didn't want to see us living under an overpass and starving to death.
They didn't want us to fail.
And, that's cool. Mine's the, guitar. So I would sit and in high school, I'm not exaggerating, I would practice 6 hours to 8 hours a day. I mean, my fingers bled and I gained competency, right? You put in the Malcolm Gladwell 10,000 hours thing, right? You put in, I've put in 20,000 on guitar, and it's kind of, but I would kind of come back and, allude, well, my friends and I were starting a band and I play guitar and I think I'm decent and I'm going to do this, and it'd be kind of like, how about doctor or lawyer for you?
Yeah.
You just go like doctor, lawyer.
What about my inner rock star?
Rock music. Yeah. It didn't map. And look, I mean, now I just hang guitars on the wall and think about, what could have been basically, and it's just kind of, so yeah, I think a lot of us have that story. But then you take the kind of, say, astronaut momentum, right? And you bounce off that and you move it forward into, because it's not like, when I think about it, I've had a really interesting career, interesting life. You've done the same. It's not like we were destroyed or anything. It just was this, it's like a, that Super Ball, it bounces, but it has spin on it and it goes off at a slightly oblique angle,
we just went down a different path.
Yeah.
And I really am grateful because where I am now, everything else has led up to this moment.
Yeah.
Right. Everything else that I've taken with me or not taken with me, or whatever path has been in front of me, it's led me to where I am now, which I love and I appreciate and I'm grateful. Let's go there.
Yeah. But let me pulse on one. Talk a little bit about the kind of Cisco years, Accenture years, this idea. So you, because of your innate talent, find yourself in leadership positions at essentially Fortune 100 companies.
Yeah.
Doing, so it's because it's not just technology, right? It's, you meet people and they casually talk to you and they don't know much about things. They go, well, you must be an engineer. It's kind of like,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah. No.
no, I'm kind of a business.
Interestingly,
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, interestingly enough, I then, I think it was it was probably at Morton International.
Yeah.
So that was right after the Thiokol, scandal
I remember.
or
Yeah.
disaster.
Yeah.
And they split into Morton. So it was Morton Salt, and then Morton Thiokol became Morton Specialty Chemicals.
Right.
And I
You're
was
talking about
sitting,
the O-ring failure on the space
yeah,
shuttle.
yeah,
I remember watching that live. It was
I know, me
jaw
too.
dropping, just jaw
Yeah.
dropping, because it was still, the space shuttle at that point was relatively new and an awesome thing. I lived in Miami at the time. You almost could step outside and see the arcing
Oh yeah, that must have
shot.
been really close. Yeah. So I was in my last year at college. I remember studying for finals
Yeah.
around that time, and
Yeah.
and then having the TV on in the background or whatever, and then there it was, right?
One of those big moments in life. It sticks with you. It's a little bit
Totally.
like September 11 in many ways. That sort
Absolutely.
of. It was it was a very cold day in Florida. I want to say Miami even hit like 40 degrees, which is, so up the coast, I think it was below freezing. And I know the temperature had something to do with the whole
Yeah.
thing. But anyways, not to
Yeah.
go down
Yeah,
that.
I don't
big
know the
deal.
specifics, but I do. Obviously, when I started at Morton, I was, given the history that
Yeah.
they had to obviously get rid of Morton, the Thiokol division,
Yeah.
for that reason. So anyway, I started
Yeah.
in the specialty chemicals, and I was in I don't even remember what they called it. It was customer service and freight forwarding and everything that had
Yeah.
to do with the shipments.
Yeah.
And I started working with the freight forwarders and shipping companies like Maersk and all that, doing my department that I was leading at that time, we're all doing the scheduling of the containers and making sure that there was, space on the ships and all of that. And
Yeah.
so that's when I got my first taste of international business, right?
Mhm.
And that, because I knew nothing about the chemicals, but I didn't need to. I knew how to get along with people, relate to people,
Yeah.
personable, all of that. And I got a taste at that point for knowing that I wanted to work in international business. But what did that really mean? I
Yeah.
knew that I could link my European background.
Yeah.
And it was before the European Union, like all of that kicked off with.
Right.
And I thought, what an opportunity to get the US and EU, like work in something that's got an entry into different countries and all of this. So yeah, I didn't know what it was going to look like at the time, but I remember at the point I was going through my master's in international business at that time. And I worked for I think he was director of finance, where this department of freight forwarding and all that sat under.
Yeah.
And I graduated in 1993 while I was at Morton. And I remember my boss saying, "That's great. Congratulations. Now I guess you can just take that diploma and stick it in the drawer because it's not going to do much for you." And I thought, wow, what again with the conditioning, right? I'm like, okay, obviously there's something, I'm not good enough at some levels, right? That's what you think. But I think I was out of that company within 6 months. I'm like, I'm going to show you, right?
Yeah.
And then it was up the ladder since then. And another, master's degree later on in psychology, which I probably should have done that all along. Going back, I would have done psychology right out of college. So,
well, I think there's this, it's never too late, right? In a way for anything. And I think that's something that I've had to kind of continually reinforce in myself, because you just think like, well, I'm not going to shift into this new technology paradigm. I'm not going to shift into this, the culture has changed and I'm a dinosaur and who cares? And I think that's your own self-acceptance and permission to move forward, where you kind of go, well, why not me? Instead of why me, why not me? Right. In a way, it is a mindset thing. And I think, so, all right. So you've worked with these global, multinationals. They're, high revenues and high revenue pressure, right?
Mm-hmm.
All these kind of, I guess, systems that we both had to work in. You notice some things, right, as you go through this journey. And I think this is really in particular to your expertise, is this idea of, this is something I think about a lot. And it's this idea of leadership and what that means. And depending on the day, if you ask me on a Tuesday, I really know a definition for it. I've got it down. And then 2 days later, Thursday, I don't honestly know what leadership means. I've come to the point now where I think I know leadership when I see it,
Mm-hmm.
which is helpful, I think, because I've worked for and with really great leaders. I've worked for and with really atrocious leaders and all points in between. So, you get to see a range of things as you go through your career. You've seen the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's one of the things I think I've landed on, though, that's meaningful to me is there's a difference between leadership and management. And so a lot of people mistake the two for the same thing. And we come out of MBA schools, we've both been, they're kind of teaching you to be a manager. And so if you conflate those two, and a lot of, I would say, mediocre to less leaders that I've worked for are very much rote managers, and I think I'm interested in your take on that. And if you probably think about these things 10 times more than I do, and actually can probably define leadership. But I'm really interested in your take on, that element of business success, building our own personal success, those types of things. Talking a lot about personal branding and all these things that are out there. To me, I think my last point, and then I'll let you kind of, drive on this one. I think that leadership in many ways. So as I was playing guitar as a kid, I got very good, just from time playing. But I realized there are people who will always be better than me. I'd sit and I'd listen to people, my heroes at the time, Eddie Van Halen or Stevie Ray Vaughan, the kind of iconic. And I reached this point where I call it this, regardless of what you believe in, those guys were touched by the hand of God. In other words, something was imbued in them to be absolutely great. If their journey found them to playing guitar, they were instilled this gift maybe at birth to achieve true greatness on the instrument. I don't know that I was touched by that hand. So whatever you believe in for afterlife and superpower and all these things, to me, there's a little bit more. And I wonder if great leaders, iconic leaders, aren't in a way born that way. So I don't know, some kind of theory that I've been toying with. But anyways, love your take on this and how you view this as a kind of business phenomenon, and you're coaching people to be better leaders and transforming them to be better leaders. So I'd love to hear kind of your view on this, and feel free to disagree, by the way.
No, I don't disagree. I think I have a different perspective on it. I don't really think about leadership as a definition.
Yeah.
I come at it with the executives that I sit with, and it becomes a conversation of what are the traits, and what are the like personality traits, skill sets, competencies, and a little bit of that yourself juice kind of thing. Like you said, you call it touched by the hand of God, and maybe some are born as a leader, but I think more so when they get up to the position that they're in. I think it comes down to a set of skills and competencies and emotional intelligence, and a good dose of empathy, so that they can, and lots of self-awareness, right? I work with so many leaders that have no self-awareness. They're a great leader in their mind. They do awesome things. They just can't seem to connect with the people that they lead. But they don't know why, right? And this is especially helpful when I'm trying to illustrate, what is it that you're not connecting with your team
Yeah.
with
Yeah.
or around. And we illustrate that when we work with the horses, because the horses won't follow you just because you were born a leader or you have a great suit or a red tie or whatever. They'll work with you and follow you and be connected to you if you're aligned, if you're congruent, if you're authentic, and if they trust you and feel safe.
Talk a little, take us through kind of, like I say, so I've been through a bunch of, I'm constantly subjecting myself to revision and, critique and the whole thing. You're doing something I think I found to be really unique. And that is this, I'm not even going to attempt to describe it, but for, the viewers, like, walk us through how you arrived. And I know you've done a lot of more traditional coaching as well, but you're doing something unique with horses and the empathic bonding there and the whole thing. I'm not even going to try to explain it because I'll butcher it up. You describe the process to you, because I think to me this is like mind blowing and unique. And the second you start, I think, thinking outside the box on how to revise your own capabilities, you've got a real good chance of doing that, because so many people are like, well, I'll read an article on LinkedIn and I'll figure this out. And that's not, always the answer. But talk about this thing that you do with, it's Caballus, right? Is your company, and it ties into this equestrian.
My company, My company name is Caballus, which is the Latin word for horse.
Right.
But I mean, this whole concept is not new. It's in fact been around the U.S. Several founders or thought leaders around how can we make horses work with us, not for us, right? Because they've historically been working for us, whether they were pack animals or in the wars or plowing the fields. And so I've always had, I think since I was, since I can remember, being able to walk and sit, always loved horses. And it might have been Legoland in Denmark I definitely got my first driver's license on one of those electric little Lego cars in Legoland. But I also think I think that's where I first rode a pony, and I must have been 4 or 5 years old, handheld pony rides. And it grabbed me. And ever since I can remember back to my childhood and teens, I've just loved being around horses, whether I was with them and not necessarily riding them, but just being in the paddock with them, and, in the field, coming by on a country road, and there was a herd of horses, in a field, and I would crawl under the fence and just go and be with them. So that's been in my blood, I guess, for a long time. And when I started my coaching training, I knew right away that I wanted to find a way to work with horses in coaching, but I didn't know at the time what it looked like. And I didn't even, in fact, I remember going through my certification, and we were in a pod or cohort or whatever they called us. Yeah. There were 9 of us, and there was a guy who was in my pod from New York City. He was a lawyer, and he was going through coach training. And he said, look, the other day I went to a coaching federation, some kind of meeting, a monthly meeting. And there was a lady there that talked about coaching with horses. And he goes, I know you've talked about this. You need to talk to her. Mm-hmm. And I did call her up, and I said, her name's Lisa. I think I need to meet with you because this is what I want to do, but I didn't know it existed. Yeah. And so she had a company and was training coaches and other people to go through and learn equine assisted learning or equine guided learning, whatever you want to call it. It's got many names, but equine facilitated learning, I think it was called at that time, EFL. And it is the practice of using, not as a tool, but, as a co-facilitator or a co-coach, the horse as your partner in making people see like what their potential is or are. Yeah. So, many different ways. Horses give us instant feedback. It's
Yeah.
not judgmental,
Yeah.
it's honest. And so there's a lot to learn through horse wisdom. And I was just so thrilled to find somebody that I could train with. And it's kind of taken off from there, right? So I'm doing a lot more training and certifications always. Every year I'm developing myself. And the most recent thing I'm going through is it's called the Diamond Model of Shared Leadership.
Yeah.
And it's also based in the horse herd. So I'm going through that certification right now as we speak.
So it's the horse is like a very attuned filter of kind of that empathic communication is my take on it. Like I don't, and I'm not an equestrian person, and I mean I think I've
no, you don't need to be. I mean, yeah, that's the thing. It's I mean, they observe, or they can't speak, so they are all about observing their environment, and they do that because it's survival, right? I mean, they just want to survive, so they're constantly scanning the environment with their body, with their ears, so hearing, seeing, sensing, smelling, even vibration in the ground through their hooves, right? So their whole body is a sensing machine.
Yeah.
And they do that just to be able to be safe. Yep. And if they sense that there's a danger, they'll assess whether they need to run or not. So here comes the fight and flight.
Right.
And so they can mirror, they really are one good way of mirroring our behavior. They look at our body language, they look at how we show up and what our intent is. And if they feel that they can, that they feel safe with us, that we can be with them and not be a threat, because we are a predator as humans, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So if they can be safe with us, then they want to be with us. And if not, if there's no alignment or congruence or, authenticity there, and we don't do what we intend to do, or we don't come across, truthful, they don't really want to be with us.
So it's like this kind of pure filter for kind of emotive content in somebody. And I imagine you probably get people who think they're on one end of the spectrum, and then they engage with the animal, and all of a sudden the horse is giving a whole different set of feedback, where that kind of dichotomy between the perceived, I'm very empathic, I'm always listening to people, I'm a born leader, and then the horse is kind of like bucking and jumping over the fence, and this guy's horrible. So I'm sure you see a bunch of that. How do you kind of reconcile that with people where they're like,
It really is. On one hand, it's kind of funny, but when you're in the situation and you're observing the behavior of I had to give you an example. Maybe that's the best way to illustrate. I had a group of senior leaders I think there were 5 or 6 of them from a company.
Right.
And this was in Dubai. And their executive director, managing director was in the paddock with the horses, and very basic task: lead the horse, through cones or something, around cones or a figure 8 or whatever, and just lead it. And I'm going to observe you, and the rest of the team will observe you, and we'll give you feedback afterwards. Yeah. So he goes in there, he grabs the horse by the lead rope, and starts to walk. And he walks backwards, and he's got the rope in front of him and the horse, and he's walking backwards the whole time and doing this. And I was like, okay, I haven't quite seen that before. So when it was all done and he did the exercise and we're giving feedback and observations and stuff, I asked him, would you mind telling me, why you were walking backwards? What was that about? And he said, well, I wanted to make sure that I was watching the horse not fall, or, that I could keep an eye on where it was going. Yeah. And I thought, okay, so how do you lead your people? Yeah. And he goes, what do you mean? I said, well, do you do you walk backwards metaphorically? Yeah. And he just went, he's like, oh. Wow. He goes, I micromanage them. Yeah. Right? Yeah.
That's the thing that, I'm kind of speaking to on there's management and there's leadership, right? And I think that's an incredible example. And I think it's so illustrative of a lot of what
Yeah,
I
because
see out there.
he could have trusted, if he had
Yeah.
trusted the horse knows where it's going. I'm
Yeah.
just, I'm partnering up with this horse and we're going to
Yeah.
go from A to B.
Yeah.
And I'll let it go. It's going to find its way. Your
Yeah.
people,
The horse is good at
yeah,
walking. Yeah. He knows how
and
to.
it's the same with your team. Your team
Yeah.
will find the way. Let them falter or let
Yeah.
them stray, but
Yeah.
trust that they
Yeah.
are going to get to from A to B without you micromanaging them.
I have had teams throughout my career and have reported into bigger teams, and I think it's something that you have to do, both manage and lead. And there's really kind of not a lot of training for it. You've got to kind of do the thing simultaneously while skilling up, I think, because it's too difficult to just kind of say, read this book, you'll be a great leader. There's so much emotional content to it. There's interpersonal dynamics, all these things. I love kind of metaphors, and I always think in terms of metaphors. I had a team, most of them at Cisco, when I was, leading up the business intelligence team for emerging markets theater. To a person, everybody was probably smarter than I was. They all did these really unique things. Certainly in certain areas, they were each smarter than me at different things that they did. And I realized it was kind of like having a garage of exotic sports cars where you kind of go, wow, they're all great. They all do great things. Some of them are pretty specialized. And I saw that my role was really keep them, topped up with gas, keep them tuned up, take care of all the little things for them, and just let them run, let them do what they do. Obviously some directional guidance, and there are certain tasks that had to be done. We have to check those boxes and everything for our senior manager, support people that we actually support. And so I think, but that was the metaphor that stuck with me, was just let these really like exotic, high performance, tuned up, capable people do their thing, and then provide kind of air support and coverage for them, in that regard. And I think that worked pretty well. It's not always the answer, and then there are some people who have to be managed for whatever reason. Those for me are always going to be a bad fit, because I am not going to micromanage. I don't believe in it. I've not seen it work well. I hate when it happens to me. My best leaders have not done that to me. My worst ones have always done that, and it just to me is this recurring theme. So I don't know if that resonates with you, that notion of, the kind of sports car metaphor, and it's a silly one, but, for me, it kind of always made sense. Part of it is just giving them regard for this incredible talent that they have, and saying, I've got to find the right racetrack for you. And when we find that right one where you are a perfect blend of cornering and straight line capability, you're going to rock it. And that's always really what I was doing, was matching the car to the track, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I think it makes total sense. And I may have had metaphors around, horses. Just let them go and be horses.
Yeah, right.
And I think it comes down to one thing. It's that there's that inherent belief that you are one team, you are a system, you're all equal, you're all needed.
Yeah.
And the trust is the ultimate foundation, right?
Yeah.
If that trust is not there, or even if it's,
yeah.
Like remotely cracked, that's when things fall apart.
Yeah, there's no question about that. I mean, I think that is a cornerstone of great leadership to me. And I define it slightly different. I call it credibility.
Yeah.
Because it is that there are messages that you can't disseminate to the entire team. some things are just limited. I can't give you quarterly information that's going to be released in the financials. Because I don't tell you that doesn't mean that you shouldn't trust me. In fact, hopefully it builds the credibility of I'm keeping that crypto until the quarter release happens. So there are moments where, that full disclosure, open environment cannot exist in business. And I think, but the credibility factor is always there. And for me, that has resided in I would always do personally the mission I'm going to ask you, direct report A to do. And I think that's huge. It's kind of, I'm not going to have you do something that I wouldn't personally do just as a matter of scale. You do it. If you need any guidance, coaching, assistance, let me know and I'll help. But I think that's a huge piece of it right there. And having that feeling from your team of, and then occasionally doing the thing, like, you know what, I'm going to go visit the client. I'll put the PowerPoint deck together. Let's talk it over. Any learnings I have, I'll bring back to the team and we can talk about it. But it's you've got to do the thing you're asking others to do or have done it to an extent where you've built that credibility. And I think that's a huge piece of the puzzle. And that's a differentiation for me between leadership and management, because managers we're supposed to achieve this, go do that thing, and then come back at the end of the quarter, and it's kind of like, well, how do I do it? What have you done in the past? Like, I don't know, just get it done. That kind of attitude.
The vision isn't there, right? I mean, that's the thing. And to get back to you letting the team be the team, you also started with a team that you put together based on what they would bring to the table.
That's right.
Again, with the skill set, the competencies. Yeah. Is there a gap? Do we need somebody to be more analytical? Let's hire somebody analytical. Do we need somebody who can, meet with the client and be that front of so you also staffed your team according to what was needed and what they were able to bring to the table in terms of what made the whole team. Yeah.
That's a unique scenario. I mean, I've come to kind of think I may not get that opportunity in business again, just because of that level of talent, the ability to completely build the team of my own accord. And I like also, there's something about, I'll call them, characters, like interesting people who do different things in addition to the, main thing that I'm asking them to do, which in our world of business, it's a lot of, can you put a spreadsheet together? Can you put a coherent PowerPoint slide together? These kind of not fun, but rote skills that you really have to have. They're almost the oxygen and currency of business. We have to do these things, but almost to a person, again, each person on my team had this really interesting background or did interesting things. One of my, I love this, person that had a degree in forestry. He was from South Africa.
I was just about to say, are you going to bring,
Stephen Cooley.
Forest ranger. I'm like, what?
Really one of the smartest people I've ever met, and I'm sure is every bit as smart now as he was back in the day. And so I'm interviewing him and I'm kind of talking it over, and I'm like, so Stephen, I just don't get this forestry degree, and you've got this incredible background in statistical analysis and putting together complex business algorithms in Excel, and connect the dots for me. I just don't get it. And he's like, and I'll do a horrible South African accent here. He'll call me Mark. So Mark, we have to count the trees. And it was like this light bulb went on in my head, and I'm like, oh, and you don't mean you're walking in the woods 10,001, 10,002. You're looking at a grid of trees from a satellite photo and statistically modeling how many trees are in the thing. And it was yes, of course. And you see these interconnections. I mean, music, I think, is the same way. It's really mathematical, so it really appeals to a part of I'm a finance quant background guy. And, it was kind of I think about music in the same way, chordal relationships and modalities and scales and things like that. They're just math, it's math. Yeah. And so I love that kind of And I wonder if, like in your leadership coaching, how are you kind of, so you're, I would think you're trying to, well, look, at the root of what you do as a leadership coach, you're really trying to transform people in a positive way, right? I'll make that assumption. I think that's the case. And so, well,
Yeah,
go ahead, please.
Well, I was just going to say, yeah, to transform, but it's not me trying to transform them.
Yeah.
It's them trying to transform themselves. And
Ah.
and so they might come to me. Let's say they come to coaching because they feel they need to be a better public speaker,
Sure.
or they need to get a little bit more confident around communications, within their department or whatever. They're already a great leader, right? I always tell them, you're not broken. There's nothing to fix.
Yeah.
You just want to be a better version of yourself.
Sure.
And so you're looking at what might I need to tweak or fine tune.
Yeah.
And then say it's communication. It's always something else as well, right? Yeah. They might come to coaching for PowerPoint presentations or learning to speak more with gravitas or whatever, be a better influencer. And it's always something else that's below that.
Yeah.
Whether it's a feeling of imposter syndrome or not really being as powerful as they think they are, or that they haven't, like you said, your whole team was probably smarter than you in some ways, but you also brought, like, this team would not be what they are without every single spoke of the wheel being in the system and being equal. Sure. So I think it's the same with people that come to coaching. They just need to they need to balance something. And what you said something before about, the people on your team also having other talents outside. There was something more to them. Yeah. Something that made them more interesting. And actually, when I worked at Accenture, that's one of the things that my then manager said. He goes, "We don't want to hire. You think of the Accenture profile or E&Y and PwC, the usual consultant kind of." He goes, "We don't want people that are going to be the usual engineer or consultant, right? Yeah. We want people who are." Maybe someone has a history degree or liberal arts or, basket weaving. I don't know, but there's something that makes them good at what they do, and we can tap into that. So when COVID hit, I was at Accenture when COVID hit, and we were all working from home, and pretty soon a video was being distributed that probably about 20 or 30 of us were part of making. Yeah. And they were banging on pots and pans. Somebody was playing guitar. Somebody else was playing a flute and then I realized, oh my God, I work with who I thought were just stuck up, arrogant consultants or, engineers of some technology or another. Yeah. And they actually were tremendously talented and versatile people. Yeah. That you weren't never wrong. Had a chance to bang on a drum, Yeah.
Well, I that's so, to me, it's this idea, the term polymath. Have you heard it to me, that is like, I'm always impressed if you kind of pull back the lens a little bit on somebody and say like, so what else do you do? And people will just shock you, if you kind of let them. And so we've got this, costume on, I call it, it's the David Bowie mask, right? Like David Bowie would constantly reinvent himself, and it wasn't David Bowie wasn't even David Bowie. He was David Jones. He becomes David Bowie, gains some, initial success. And then he starts on this journey of building characters out, doing those for 3-4 years, shifting the character. And so I think so many of us in business build kind of a David Bowie-esque character. I'm the thin white Duke, or I'm Ziggy, and live in that cloak when there's really so much more to us. Much like Bowie himself, he was well-read, I would say a genius by any metric. but more so, than just music and stagecraft. There's like a ton of, he was an expert in world religion and philosophy and all these things. And I think so many of us are that, but we have this notion of there's a business character, a mask, a David Bowie character that I've built and created and live in that frame, that world. And when I think a lot of us have this kind of polymath, certainly yourself, this whole idea of expertise in equestrian things and then fusing that into business, it's I think that's where the greatness can happen, if you allow that background to.
I think that's a choice, right?
Yeah.
There's a choice to show up with a mask and then let the role identify you.
Yeah.
Rather than you identify the role that you're in, and let your different like I said before, let your inner rock star out, right?
Right.
I worked with a very a managing director who had, I think he had 35 years with Accenture. Wow. And what nobody knew until kind of when he was retiring, everybody's like, "What are you going to do now?" He goes, "Well, I'm gonna work on my hobby. I'm a photographer." Yeah. And he was an amazing photographer, and nobody knew. Right?
Yeah.
And so there are all these little, different versions of ourselves that we need to let out at some point, right? Yeah. And that's where I think maybe a lot of the fear comes in. It's like I don't want to show that side of myself.
Yeah,
that's in the shadow. No, bring it out into the light. Yeah. And what are the opportunities then?
Well, life is short too, and you kind of realize at some point we get into our careers and you kind of realize, wow, I'm lacking some authenticity here in terms of bringing myself to the role and working with people. And do they know who I am, or am I just this David Bowie character that I've invented? And I think you want to peel it back to the essence of you if you can, but that takes a certain, I think, courage level and, skill to be able to go, all right, you know what? Confident enough, I'm credible enough to be able to kind of release some of the, stage paint and really just kind of show people really what I do and who I am. But I think that's kind of, I don't see that all the time necessarily, and I wonder if there's like a methodology to doing that you've found.
Not so much a methodology as it is in coaching, just peeling back the layers of, what is standing in the way of coming into the core of the real person. Yeah. Like, what do you want to show the world? Yeah. And if you have a passion, or you have, it's like being able to, once you reach that point where you're able to let go of what you think other people think of you, right? Because what does that matter? Right. But that's hard. Yeah. That's really hard. And it's also scary. Yeah. I'm going to let people, I'm being vulnerable. Yeah. And that's being weak. Yeah. When in fact it's not. It's people, I think, will respect you more if they see the vulnerable side of you. Yeah. And see that you are human and that you also fail, or you're not perfect, or and to get to that, there are some people I coach that will never be able to let go of that. But most of the leaders I work with, they get it, and they're like, oh yeah, I want to be able to just let go of what the expectations are of me, and just, like be stepping out of that comfort zone. Yeah. Which is where all the learning is. It's the richness of, what you can become. Yeah. So that's, for me, that's the fascinating part of coaching, is being able to take people over that edge and say, oh, what is possible when you let go of this belief? What are the opportunities? Yeah. What might happen if you open this door?
I think that's the risk assessment piece, right? And the podcast name is, Risk Takers Unleashed. And I think that, people have asked me like, well, some people really don't take a lot of risks. And I kind of invert that to, most of us take a pretty substantial amount of risk. Certainly, I think those of us who've gone down the business path, but in many areas of life, moving to a new location or country is a risk. You know all this.
Yeah.
Deciding you're going to change to a different company or a different role, that's a risk. All these things are actually quite substantial risks. And I think people get caught up in the risk avoidance mode when the journey, it seems to me, is the taking of the risk and then the iterating from the relative success or relative failure that whatever the endeavor was. And it's rarely a 100% failure or 100% success, right? Reality is always in that gray space in the middle where it kind of like, oh, this weird thing happened that I didn't even plan for, which was good. But then two other weird things happened that were not good. And I've got to reconcile that and make it work. But that makes you stronger, right? In the end, I think. And that's the thing. I've got another thing I want to kind of throw at you, which, so as I think about business and for better or for worse with the gray hair, I'm reaching the point where I think about eras of business, where it's because I'm decades in like yourself, and I kind of think, wow, there are these kind of eras that we've gone through, technology standpoint, management approaches, things like this. I'm thinking a lot today about the notion of hierarchy. And I think it's intrinsic in all of this conversation of leadership and credibility and management that we're discussing right now. But it's the notion of, have we reached a point where at least traditional model of hierarchy, the direct reporting relationship, and it's a pyramid, and I report to an SVP, and below me are three directors, and it's this kind of traditionally pyramidally shaped model, and we're all kind of kicking up to the top of the pyramid in terms of goals and vision. And I'm almost to the point now where that maps to me to management, and I think really it always had done so. And I think it's this idea of, as we pull the concept of leadership out and assess it in terms of ability to connect with your teams, ability to vocally convey the vision for a company, to be able to, I think, lead with empathic ability to kind of persuade people. I think that for me, I see the split between management and leadership growing and growing, which I think is a good thing. And I wonder if we're not like entering the death of the hierarchy in terms of corporate model, or is that just a secret hope of mine?
No, I was like, I'm sitting here going, oh my God, I cannot believe you are going down that path. 100%.
Yeah.
Hierarchy is very damaging to an organization, right? It completely stops communication and collaboration. And what happens is it also blocks empathy and emotional intelligence.
Sure.
So empathy, because there is very little empathy at the very top.
Yeah. Right.
And so all of the empathy is at the lower levels where it's then overripe. Yeah. Right. And probably with no boundaries and whatnot. Yeah. And this is one of the things that we're talking about in my, so I'm part of the emotions and the empathy and all of the things that I've studied around that. I've been part of this dynamic emotional integration group led by an American author, Carla McLaren. Mm-hmm. And she's got some amazing books. She wrote one book in particular for business called The Power of Emotions at Work. And this is all about how you are not able to come to work with your emotions. Please park them outside. And yet you have unofficial roles of an emotional worker, right? Right. There's always somebody that takes that role of being the empathic, emotional, whatever, where everything lands on them, and they are pulled and stretched and drained of energy, because who else can they talk to? Who else can help them with this stuff? Where else can we voice our, whatever is going on? And so I think you're right. I think the old-fashioned patriarch, and it
Yeah.
is in fact very damaging. It leaves no room for collaboration or communication or empathy or emotional intelligence.
You can almost create the argument that the higher up in the hierarchy one might be, the more need for empathic leadership that there is. And that seems to be completely flipped around, or we're moving towards that, hopefully. So I mean, yeah, good. I'm glad to hear you say that. And, I say this at kind of like essentially I'm in the kind of, later stages of career path when I might enjoy benefits of hierarchy. I've never found it to be a comfortable place to lead from. I just I don't get the value because I don't think it's there, and maybe there are facets of life, perhaps, military command and control. There's some necessary attributes to that. The order is given, the order must be followed through, or people will die. If someone questions it or waits, I'm sure there's a place for it. And I don't want to be so, oblique that I don't, obviously there's a place somewhere for hierarchy. It came to be. I just view it as a kind of a crudely fashioned leadership tool that doesn't really have application in a modern business paradigm, to my mind. So yeah, no, good to hear you say that, Pia.
And I mean, if you look at so what I see in most of the executives that I coach, and this is all across the C-suite.
Yeah.
Many of them feel they have to take the whole responsibility on their shoulders.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm the CEO, and therefore the buck stops with me. Yes. Yeah. Okay. There is some accountability and responsibility. I agree. And why wouldn't you share that with others?
Yeah.
So, you don't have to bear the burden. You can ask for help. You can delegate. You can ask for wingmen. Right.
Yeah.
And that's where that diamond model of shared leadership come in. But when you look at a horse herd, wild horses, they're very few of them left because they're being hunted by helicopters in the U.S. But that's another pet peeve of mine. But yeah, I mean, looking at a real wild herd of horses in nature, when there's a crisis, and my mentor from this coaching, this training that I'm going through, she said, when you have a crisis in a horse herd, horses don't scatter, they convene. Whereas if people face a crisis, they scatter, they run around like, chickens with their heads cut off. Oh my God, what are we going to do? There's a fire. So in a herd, you've got the lead mare, you've got the stallion, you've got what we call the sentinels, the people that are the horses that are kind of on the side, will help new herd members or new foals, but they'll be sharing that. It's not the stallion in the front. It's not always the lead mare in the front. Yeah. Sometimes the stallion will be in the rear, and so, because it's all about, again, looking at the environment and what threats are there around them, and where are the resources? Where is the watering hole? Where are the grass? So they share that burden, if you will, or they share the role of leading the mass herd to resources and whatnot.
I'm sure you've seen the kind of imagery of the wolf pack, and where they'll show kind of, there's a lead wolf, there's a trailing wolf, there's the younger ones are in the middle. And at first I kind of was like, well, that's hierarchy, isn't it? And it's like, well, it's also capability set. Maybe the best vision or hearing wolf is in the front, so they've kind of earned that right based on competency, capability. The muscular, tough one is in the very back, so he can kind of come in as a flanker if there's trouble. The young new wolves or the pups are in the middle, semi-protected, and you realize I guess there's a place really for all of this, and finding that balance point. But I love that shows my just complete lack of knowledge of horses, but I love that they cluster in times of chaos. And it is true. You see panic situations on the news and just people just running in every direction.
Yeah.
And you go like, wow, we're really unorganized. We really just don't work. And maybe like teamwork in general is a very unnatural move or a learned, thing for us as humans. And look, I mean, I'll be honest, I'm just as happy working solo as I am on a team. I like both for speed, and I'm roughly always in agreement with myself. So, that becomes
Hey, less argument.
There's a few that there's like two voices in the head or more. But yeah.
And isn't it amazing? I was thinking about this earlier today. It's amazing how wise we become. I'm like, in the last 10 years, I have become exponentially wiser than, the 20 years before the last 10 years. And I'm just like, why couldn't I see all this, when I was 25 or 30 or 35, but then, there was different circumstances, but it is, it's amazing how not only wise, but also relaxed, and how able I am to let go of stuff that I would get really worked up.